an unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, we're a little bit new at doing Dharma talk this way, using the screen and us and technology and what have you. It's something that we are all trying to get used to. So we'll do our best with it. I'm very pleased to come back to our Wednesday night in person. We've been on screen now for a year almost, and it's been very difficult for so many people to feel alone and distant from one another. And now that we've come back, we have this odd feeling of actually being with people, and it's glorious and strange at the same time. So delighted to be here with you tonight. The importance of being together in person in Zen practice is that it's so easy for us practicing alone to do whatever we want. Sometimes people sit zazen and have a cup of coffee beside them and drink coffee while they're sitting zazen or something like that. And so we don't have the accompaniment of others then to help us with the discipline of practice, because it does involve a discipline. It does involve training. Our practice we can also call training. And the question of sitting as we sit is really important, that we are able to truly listen and allow the body to be in the totality of emptiness. Last week, so a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what we spoke about last week, and then I want to lengthen it about some things that I said that I want to explain further. So we were talking about the question of listening and learning, but learning was the subject actually. So Zazen, the practice of meditation, involves learning. And we wonder, well, what are we learning? It isn't a skill that we are learning particularly. It isn't anything intellectual. And yet we are learning really important aspects of Zen practice. We are learning patience. We are learning to understand the body and to allow the skandhas, the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, tongue, body, mind, to be truly empty, and allowing them to simply operate on their own without ego interference. The body is perfect as it is. We are perfect as we are. And the body operates on its own without our having to tell us, oh, now tell myself to see, or tell myself to hear, or tell myself to breathe. These happen naturally, and they are a full expression of emptiness. The body is a perfect expression of emptiness. So when we sit together, then we allow this to take place. We allow the learning of emptiness. We allow the learning of compassion. We allow the learning of kindness and generosity. And it seems odd, perhaps, that this kind of learning could take place by sitting still. And yet, it is a perfect posture of the body's excellence and the mind's excellence. We are essentially unencumbered. Once the bell rings, it is total freedom. Not unencumbered by anything around us. We are free to simply be emptiness. So learning is a fundamental piece in Zazen. And we aren't learning for something. We aren't learning a skill of some kind. Although that does happen, we become more facile in our meditation as we practice, as we train the body to be in this perfect posture. We become those aspects of the Bodhisattva. We become the aspects of virtue that the Bodhisattva speaks about. We are training to be Buddha, training to be Bodhisattva. But this is more difficult to do when we sit by ourselves. We don't have the same stretch of awareness of others and the importance of that in our practice. So last week, after we spoke about some of this, we also fell into a discussion of psychology. And I don't exactly remember it, but I want to say that I may have sounded as though I dismissed psychology and its importance, and I certainly didn't mean to. I think that I said something that if a person feels the need for counseling and psychology, that Zazen and counseling are a great combination. But I may have been dismissive in terms of talking about growing up, and that we grow up and we wake up and we clean up, those three aspects of work that we do. But, it isn't as though we work out our psychology and then we never meet it again. Our personal growth goes on forever. We are growing throughout our entire lives. And it may be that we have come to a developmental stage in which we really understand, we've reviewed ourselves enough, we understand our own psychology, and we're okay with it. And yet we will meet it again when we meet circumstances that we are unfamiliar with, or some kind of something is going to throw us into a new challenge in which we will face ourselves psychologically yet again. And that will go on throughout our whole lives. It never stops. But there's certainly a developmental level in which we're okay. We're finally okay with ourselves. We can accept the dark side of ourselves. We can accept the virtuous side of ourselves. And we're okay with that. The dark side is an extremely important creative side of us. So it isn't something that we cover up and throw away. We use it in our lives. We use it creatively in our lives. So it's an important aspect of the psyche. So if I were to think about a psychology that aligns us religiously, that aligns us in a religious way, I come perhaps to Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote the book man's search for meaning. Man, he means human beings, not a gender. And he came to this having been in Dachau and various concentration camps. He was moved around to various concentration camps. And he writes about his experience in the concentration camps, and everything is removed. There is nothing left to identify with oneself as a person whatsoever. It's just gone. And so he ponders whether there is some meaning at all in life when there is nothing there. Even one's clothes are removed. One is given clothes that one has never seen before. He smuggled in his writings, which was to be his treatise on meaning. He smuggled it inside his shirt, and of course it was found and immediately burned. And so nothing that of the value of his life was left. And so he finally comes and he survives the camps, and he comes to write his philosophy and his psychology, logotherapy, he calls it. But to me, it is, in essence, a very fine way to live, to think about how to live and to give meaning to one's life. And the first part he says is that we ought to have some creative activity, something that we do that is creative, that comes out of us, that we work toward, that we give to the world. Don't know what that is, something we have to find out for ourselves, whatever our talents and capacities are, whatever those talents may be, are expressed creatively. The second, he says, of importance is that we either find a work that we absolutely love, or that we find someone that we love, and that we engage in that work of the heart to understand meaning. In that, he gives a story of a woman who attempted suicide. One child had died, and her second child suffered from something really debilitating, so that the child could barely move, and that she was the caregiver now for this second child. And she couldn't stand it, and so she attempted suicide. She became a patient of Frankl. And he said that as he worked with her on this question of meaning and love, she came to understand how much she had loved the child who died and how much she loves the child who is incapacitated. And that this aspect of love within herself gave her deep meaning. And she was able to go past this desperate, debilitating, personal, desperate feeling of needing to do away with her life. And she came around to see that the act of love in itself gave her incredible meaning. It's usually not something heroic that we do. Our lives are mostly pretty mundane, and meaning in life is not about wearing badges of accomplishment, putting trophies on the shelf, or doing great, outstanding things. It's about caring for those around us every day, loving, giving love to those in our midst. And that's what Frankl is talking about as a second important aspect of meaning. The third aspect he speaks about is that nobody in the whole world ever, no matter what your situation is, can tell you what kind of attitude to have about it, about suffering, about joy, about anything, any aspect of our lives. Nobody can tell you what attitude to have. And yet, the right attitude about that is pretty important in terms of living our lives well. And he speaks about suffering too, that there is personal suffering, suffering that involves me, that I create myself, that my own ego wraps around itself, and I create situations around my own ego suffering. And then there is heroic suffering. And so this aspect of heroic suffering is the question of sacrifice. Are we able to sacrifice for the sake of something, for the sake of our creativity, for the sake of the work that we love to do? What attitude do we take about that? What attitude do we take about when things are really, really, really difficult? What attitude is it? And we are personally responsible for that. Nobody else gives that to us. We are responsible. So responsibility is a big piece of Zen practice. We're responsible for our own spiritual dynamic, our own spiritual health. And so nobody else makes us sit zazen. Nobody makes us come to the cushion. We're responsible to care for our own spiritual health. And what attitude we take toward that, of course, is key to, I think, key to this aspect of learning in zazen. It's hard for me to exactly explain what the posture of learning is in zazen. It is a presence of being present and simply open to every single moment, or to being present, to simply open to that, so that we are receptive to whatever happens, to whatever birds are singing, or to whatever noises we hear from one another, whatever arises in our own self, whether we feel some pain in the body, anything like that. Are we in a posture of learning? And that posture goes throughout the day. When we are doing anything, if we practice learning, we are relieved of the encumbrance of all kinds of difficulties that churn around in us in the course of a day that we can do nothing about. But if we are in that posture, I don't know what else to call it, except it's a posture of body and mind. If we are in that posture, thinking, the usual thinking and churning just dissipates, it just falls away. Because in order to learn, we must be listening. And if we are listening, we're not doing other things, we're simply listening. So that is my response to last week that I didn't elaborate on, that I think needed to be said. because I do think I was dismissive of psychology. And Frankl is both a psychology and a religious kind of psychology. So maybe some of you are familiar with logotherapy. Probably Gilda is out there. And maybe not. If not, it's great to recap and look at again. Simple and very clear, and moves toward meaning and the meaning in our lives and the importance of that. I know I took a course as an undergraduate in existential phenomenology. And in that study, I forget what I was going to say right at this moment. Sorry. Forget what I was going to say about it. I went too deeply into it, I think, but no matter. Means go in one ear and out the other. So, but meaning, or now I recall. So the teacher said, and he taught, he did philosophical therapy. That's what he called it. And there is such a field as philosophical therapy. And he felt that most people who suffer from not severe mental illness, but disturbances, depression, so forth, those kinds of things, anxiety, he felt was philosophically based. And that when we settle out our philosophy and we understand ourselves in this way, and we come to meaning in our lives, we settle out those encumbering kinds of difficulties, emotional difficulties. I am inclined to agree with him, but I am not neither really a philosopher nor a counselor or any of those. But I do think there's a great importance in understanding what one's philosophy is, as well as one's psychology. And while Zen practice does not particularly engage in philosophy, at the same time, we can talk about Buddhism as an overall philosophy, a way to live. And I think that is what Frankl is saying, that these basic approaches are a good way to live, and that they are religious based. They are spiritually based practices, foundations of spiritual life. So, my friends, maybe you have some questions. Yes.
I don't have a question, but just a comment.
Speak loud so everybody can hear. Yeah.
Just a comment for everybody. Viktor Frankl's book is in our Zendo library. And if our library ever reopens, and if you're not familiar with it, you're welcome to check it out.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of the most read books in English printing. Maybe it's almost up, not quite up with the Bible, but it's up there. Millions and millions and millions of copies have been sold of this book, and it's a profound experience to read it. So I encourage. Of course, I encourage our search for meaning, with that one finds meaning in one's life, by all means, by all means. So, all right. I have no idea of the time. A Dharma talk just happens and we go forward. And on Wednesday nights, we have tried to keep it to 1 hour. And so when we are at usual practice, we go over that a little bit. We go into about an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half. And gradually we will work our way a little bit toward that. We will, after a few weeks, we'll include some chanting the Heart Sutra, and include some other practice. So we're stepping gently toward our usual Wednesday night practice. And all I can say is it feels very, very nice to be together with people and to thank you. I sit here for the sake of including those who are visiting from out of town. If you are local, I really encourage you to come. But I look out and I think most of you are at a distance. So I'm so happy that we can be together, and that is really wonderful. So thank you very much for your practice. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it. I'm going to close the screen down, but please wait. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your practice. See you soon.